Hello and welcome to coverage of Pro Tour Aether Revolt. I'm Marshall Sutcliffe in the booth with Ian Duke. We are in Dublin, Ireland, and we're ready for round one action. The booster drafts have finished, and now it's time to play. We've got two Hall of Famers facing off. We've got a real treat down here in the feature match area. That's Ben Stark, you see, from Team Channel Fireball Ice. Across from the table from him, that is Shuhei Nakamura from Team Haruruya. And these guys are both Hall of Famers. They're both absolutely top-level respected pros, and on top of all of that, they're both kind of limited people. You know, Ben is absolutely known for limited, and I have to say Shuhei is as well. Drafters through and through, these two. And let's see how things go. It looks like a Renegade map for Ben Stark is going to kick things off in the early turns, as well as a Sage of Shayla's Claim. Nothing too exciting for him. On Shuhei's side of the table, he's got, looks like a little Revolt deck going here. I've got the deck list in front of me here as we look at one of the things that you can go for here is a Revolt themed deck. Though a lot of times these decks can be pretty tricky to put together. Now he's got a Green Wheel Liberator on the table there, but as you can see, it doesn't have any +1/+1 counters on it, and that means he wasn't able to get Revolt. You know, the only really good way to do it is with a Renegade map or an Unbridled Growth on turn 1 so that you can get that turn 2 4/3. It's very difficult to set up. Nice little play here from Ben Stark. He waited to use his Renegade map until he knew he could play his Vengeful Rebel, which he did, and he took down a key uncommon with Aerial Responder on the other side of the table. So that was a big swing in Ben's favor. The Green Wheel Liberator is going to get in for a couple of damage, knocking Ben down to 16. Now, one thing while we have a short second here as well, Ian, is I want to point out something on our graphic. Do you see the advantage bar just above the player's life totals?
I do.
So this is a new thing that we're trying out here at the Pro Tour. This is, you know, Magic is an interesting game. It has this fascinating element where sometimes the life totals don't actually describe who's ahead in a game.
That's very, very true. There are so many different axes, I guess, on which you can take an advantage in a game of Magic, be it card advantage, right, a huge tempo swing, getting more stuff on board early, or, of course, you know, simply being ahead on life total. But usually it's a combination of all those factors that determine who's winning. So we're going to use this advantage bar to kind of help communicate which player we think is ahead as the game goes on.
Exactly. And right now, that was a nice little play from Shuhei Nakamura. He played an Aviary Mechanic. He picked up his Green Wheel Liberator. Now that means that he satisfied the requirement for Revolt. And then he replayed it, even though it happened to be the exact same card, and Revolt was enabled, so he's now made himself a 4/3.
That's right. Ben
is just going to go ahead and block with his Rebel. He's going to feel pretty happy to have traded off for a rare and an uncommon with one card there, the Vengeful Rebel. And I'm curious to see what Shuhei Nakamura's follow-up play is, because this is going to be really important. He's trying to clear the board out so that he can get more attacks through Ben's Aether Herder there, and then the 2/1 Sage of Shayla's Claim. But what is going to be the best way? He has a 5th mana here. What's it going to be? Renegade Rallier, and boom, guess who's back again? It looks like Shuhei says, look, I can trade for card advantage here as well. And he's even got more. He's going to use an Implement of Ferocity to make that Green Wheel Liberator huge. It's got 3 +1/+1 counters on it. It's a 5/4.
Yeah, very, very nice turn there for Shuhei Nakamura.
I was going to have you slide that advantage bar over towards Ben, but I think it's back in Shuhei's field now. And you see a little bit of the weakness of Ben's deck. Overall, it really did come together for him. For those of you who were watching, we saw him kind of commit to green in the first pack, get good green out of the second, a little lighter in the third, but get really good black cards out of the third pack, including a couple of nice rares. Unfortunately, Reservoir Walker, you know, not one of the premium cards in his deck, and that's all he had for this turn. In the meantime, boom, here comes Shuhei Nakamura. And Ben doesn't want to take the risk on going for a double block on the 5/4 Green Wheel Liberator, so he's just going to settle for a trade with the Renegade Rallier. And it's a nice follow-up here for Shuhei as well. He's got a Bastion Mastodon, a nice 5-drop. Certainly trumps Ben's 5-drop of a 3/3. Things are looking pretty good here, I think, for Shuhei. Why don't we reflect that? Ben's now in the tank here as he decides what he wants to do.
Where the service?
Looks like Ben's just going to go ahead and attack with both creatures. Shuhei's going to decline to block here. And you can see one of the reasons that Ben might want to make an attack like that is that he could easily have a Revolt card of his own in hand, and he did. He had a Silkweaver Elite Shuhei, leveraging some of his life total there to fall down to 12. And he's going to go ahead and attack with his whole team. So we've got a real slugfest here in game one. Both players just attacked with all of their creatures in the last 2 turns. So.
Yeah, this is where the vigilance on that Bastion Mastodon really comes in handy for Shuhei Nakamura here. Just having a huge creature that can both attack and block each turn. Sounds really simple, but it's a huge factor here, given the board state.
Yeah, this is not a lethal attack as it sits. It's only for 11, Ben's at 14, so he's not compelled to block, but gosh, that Bastion Mastodon's a pretty big problem for him. And one of the things that you and I mentioned from Ben's deck is if we had a complaint about it, it would be that he doesn't have a lot of spot removal. He's just got the Cruel Finality as a way to deal with a creature. And something like a 4/5 Bastion Mastodon presents a pretty big issue for him. It looks like Ben's going to soak up. He's going to trade off and chump block the 5/4 Greenwheel Liberator to fall down to 10. As he does have Monstrous Onslaught in his hand, unfortunately his biggest creature is only 3 power at the moment. He really would like to at least get that up to 4 power so he could take down the Greenwheel Liberator. Now there's an Audacious Infiltrator on the board as well. He's going to continue to apply pressure. Yeah, I'm definitely giving this one advantage Shuhei at the moment, but you know how Magic can go. Things don't always stay that way. And what's happening now is Ben is thinking about the cards in his deck and what the best line of play is going to be going forward. And ultimately, he plays a land and passes. He decides that firing off Monstrous Onslaught really just to kill an Audacious Infiltrator is not going to get the job done here, as he can block it with the Silkweaver Elite anyway. And Shuhei knows his job. He's just going to keep jamming. This one is starting to really shape up well for Shuhei. And Ben finally just says, okay, I'm going to double block. Do your worst. And you know what? That could have gone a lot worse for him. He traded off his Silkweaver Elite for the Infiltrator, and the double block was successful. He is still facing down a really annoying card with that Bastion Mastodon. Oh, nice draw for Ben, though. A Ridge Scale Tusker. Now he's got the 5/5 that he needs to take advantage of his Monstrous Onslaught in hand, and the pair of green uncommons could do serious work. There's a Felidar Guardian, but no attack from Shuhei Nakamura, and I think that the advantage bar is swinging right back towards Ben Stark now.
Yeah, I totally agree. That really, really evened up this game here, potentially even putting things in favor of Ben Stark here. And if we see this Monstrous Onslaught come down, which we do,
bang!
Just takes out that Bastion Mastodon, really opening the door here for Ben Stark to get back in this game.
Attacks for 9. A good draw from Shuhei, though. He just found a Riparian Tiger. It looks like it's not enough. He's just going to scoop him up, and that's Ben Stark taking down game 1. That Monstrous Onslaught looked pretty bad in his hand with only the 3-powered creatures, but then when he just slammed 6 more power, 5/5 plus a +1/+1 counter on the battlefield, things looked a little better for Ben, and he was able to slam the door on that game very quickly. All right, we will be back after these messages.
Check out Aether Revolt Booster Draft Leagues on Magic Online. Build a deck at your own pace and play at your convenience. Draft anytime, play anytime. For more information, visit mtgo.com.
It's time to take back the power!
Up your game with Ultra Pro Magic the Gathering accessories. Find the best Magic art on card sleeves, deck boxes, playmats, and more. Visit ultrapro.com to learn more and find a retailer near you.
And welcome back to the feature match area here in Dublin, Ireland. I'm Marshall Sutcliffe in the booth with Ian Duke. And we're ready for game number 2 between our 2 Hall of Famers here in round 1. Ben Stark ultimately took down that initial game thanks to one of the best, actually, I would actually say 2 of the best uncommons in the set going at it there in his hand. And they both happen to be green. That was Monstrous Onslaught and Ridge-Scale Tusker working hand in hand to decimate Shuhei Nakamura's biggest creature and clear the way for a bunch of attacks. We'll see if Ben can put together similar. He's got some rares and some really powerful stuff that he did not see in the first game.
Trade you guys for a new pen if anyone has.
Looks like that pen's not a Hall of Famer. It ran out of ink on him.
Thank you.
I see.
Shuhei's taking a mulligan here as well.
Yeah, that looks good. Keeping life in style.
It's the great pen exchange. I took it from one of the...
You can see that the players are wearing their team jerseys down there now. It's the Team Haruruya there for Shuhei.
I'll just let you get all the value.
One of the premier teams, primarily out of Japan. There's a few others that are real headliners. And looks like Ben got a little cold. He's used to that warm Florida weather. But underneath that, he does have a Team Channel Fireball Ice jersey. Most of the big teams have jerseys that makes them easily recognizable, for us on coverage, and you can kind of just spot who's who. Team thing's real interesting, Ian. I'm fascinated by this.
I'm totally digging it. I like the jerseys. I like that players they're playing for more than just themselves, And so much of Magic is about playing with a group of friends and the camaraderie there and having good testing partners and so forth. It's great to see that reflected in official capacity here at the Pro Tour.
Some interesting changes to the dynamics. I had a chance to chat with Alexander Hoen. In fact, I did a short interview. We'll see. But one of the things that I talked to him about was when you're testing with your teammates prior to to it affecting the actual tournament, if they said, I'm just going to play this other deck, I think it's better than the one you guys picked. You'd be like, hey, it's your choice.
Yeah, you're like, sure, whatever. I wouldn't do that if I were you.
Yeah,
but that's
now
fine.
you're like, no. No, you do not get to make that decision. All right, looks like Shuhei has kept a 6 here, and we will be underway. Let's see.
Can I start?
These 2 have also been testing teammates in the past. It's worth noting as well. Sort of in Channel Fireball's heyday, the team, the 2010 era. Both of these players run that a lot. No 2-drop from Ben Stark, and also none from Shuhei Nakamura. Also no 3-drop.
Wow, this is really surprising to me, Marshall, because both these decks, especially the way they played out in Game 1, they're very much curve decks. We saw Ben Stark really prioritizing 2 and 3 drops during the draft.
Look at this! Untethered Express for Shuhei Nakamura. Probably the best thing he could do on turn 4. And Natural Obsolescence in hand for Ben Stark, and a Bristling Hydra as well.
Huge swing there back and forth.
Wow, yeah. Ben not doing anything on turn 3 and then finding one of the best possible targets for his sideboard card. Fantastic. And then he gets to untap and just play a powerful rare. Now, Shuhei has fought back here with the Riparian Tiger, which does successfully block a Bristling Hydra, even if the Hydra were to use up the 3 energy that it's garnered there. So, still like Ben's side, he hasn't played anything for his turn yet. And he's just going to attack. Shuhei respecting the possibility of a removal or pump spell, decides just to take the damage. And there's Monstrous Onslaught post-combat from Ben Stark. He could have done that first to just for sure clear the way, but he didn't.
Yeah, I mean, what that says is he actually values the Monstrous Onslaught more than the Hydra, potentially. He'd be happy with the trade there.
Or that he has his copy of Cruel Finality in hand.
That's also possible.
Let's take a look. Ding.
Sure enough, you're right.
There it
that
is.
would have been quite the blowout had Shuhei blocked there.
Yeah.
And
not a bad turn, turn 6 here, actually, for Shuhei. He did play 5 mana worth of creatures. Unfortunately, they're both Revolt creatures, and neither had Revolt.
Yeah, that's one thing that we've seen, actually, a lot of players talking about here this weekend, is that these Revolt synergies, they're not totally reliable. I feel like building the Revolt deck is kind of a little bit of a red herring in that no matter how well you build your deck, you're not necessarily going to reliably trigger your Revolt effects each time you draw them. So it's kind of more of an incidental synergy that might come up. Maybe you're trying to set up an attack where one of your creatures trades with one of theirs, and then you get Revolt or so on. But
By the way, this is Ben Stark casting Ridgescale Tusker and Prey Upon in the same turn to clear away for an attack for his Bristling Hydra. And it is going to be very difficult for Shuhei to come back from this. You know, Shuhei with mainly a curve-based deck, it's going to be tough. He just drew a Aviary Mechanic, which will allow him to do that same trick, but now with the Countless Gears Renegade to net him a 1/1 servo. You know, this is also part of the thing, is that you'll play a Countless Gears Renegade just because, 2/2 for 2, and occasionally you get a free servo, and you know he'll get that here, but that isn't, you know, that isn't so mind blowing, right? This isn't a huge payoff just getting a servo. Yeah, Ben Stark has really kind of had his way this game, no doubt about it. And Shuhei's just going to return the Countless Gears Renegade and then just immediately replay it and garner the servo. This could buy him a little bit of time, but it does not solve the problems that he's facing down from Ben, which is, well, it's just beef. I mean, look at the side of his battlefield here. That's 10 damage.
Yep, in comes a 5/5 Ridgescale Tusker, a 5/4 Bristling Hydra. Just huge creatures there, and we can see in Ben Stark's hand, he is well prepared for whatever Shuhei is going to block with here with that copy of Cruel Finality.
Yep.
Able to give a creature -2/-2 at instant speed. Really has the potential to blow Shuhei out in combat here.
It's really tough, too, because Shuhei is now thinking, okay, I remember back to that early turn, and I think you probably have a card like Cruel Finality or a Pump Spell, but can he actually risk... Can he take 10 here? If Ben has a Pump Spell, then the game ends on the spot, so he's going to have to block something. And is it time for him to just say, triple block? You know, kill one of your creatures and then try to find an answer for the one that's left over. He knows how incredibly risky that is, but at the same time, if he just starts chump blocking, he can never win.
That's right. And in situations like this, Marshall, you have to ask yourself, okay, I think my opponent might have a trick, like a removal spell, like a Pump Spell, but if they do, can I still win? And if the answer is no, you just have to play as though they don't have it. You have no other options. Essentially, you can cut off that probability tree, right? Where it's like, I think they probably have it, but I'm not going to win that game anyway. So slice that off the tree, and then what's my next best play?
And here we go. He's going for it, and this is going to not end well for Shuhei. Shuhei just starts looking at the next few cards to see if that would have won him the game. But unfortunately for Shuhei, the ones in hand were not going to get the job done. And that was Ben Stark taking down Shuhei Nakamura 2-0. And the first one was a little shaky. The second one wasn't. And even with that, Ben didn't even draw some of his good cards, too. We never saw either of his good black rares that he got out of the last pack. The Marionette Master never showed up.
Yeah, he's got a lot more power in that deck. We did see the Ridgescale Tusker and the Monstrous Onslaught both games, though.
We did.
Yeah.
And what more do you need, right?
Yeah.
And Ben didn't need anything else.
Maybe a removal spell for your opponent's bomb uncommon also, which we saw there as well.
Yes,
the Untethered Express
a very
taken out.
Yeah, a very well-timed natural obsolescence there. All right, that means that we're going to pop over to one of our side tables where we've got Rich Hoen playing against Owen Turtenwald. And Rich had won game number 1 from Owen. As we join, I believe we're just in the middle section here of game number 2.
3.
Yeah, looks like it. Whoa, that's a lot of lands for Owen. My goodness.
Yep. Here you go.
Also, I see an Ethereum cell on the battlefield. That means that Owen has Tezzeret, and you can see Tezzeret hiding in the graveyard, but things looking really bad for Owen right now. Rich Hoen attacking on multiple levels, but this could save him. An Implement is going to draw him 2 cards. Oh no, more lands? Really? He's still got another land in hand. It looks like Owen has drawn a significant number of lands. Yep. And Owen is now down to 2. And he's facing down a Welder Automaton and an overwhelming board state. This one's not looking good at all. I think that we're going to see Rich Hoen capitalize on his huge advantage here.
Yep. Combat. Yep. Good games.
And that's going to do it. So we see the handshake here. Owen Turtenwald extends the hand to Rich Hoen. Rich, an absolute limited beast. He is certainly one of the better limited players out there. And Owen Turtenwald's going to start his Pro Tour off tough. 0-1.
Yeah, it's a shame. Owen's deck was looking pretty cool there. He had blue-black, a bunch of artifacts, Tezzeret, we think, as well, based on the Ethereum stall that we saw. So, you know, would love to see more of Owen there, but unfortunately did not work out that well for him in that game.
Yeah, that is actually going to do it, it looks like, for our feature matches down there. That was a pretty quick one. Jack Dobbin, I believe, won 2-1 or maybe 2-0 over Marcio Carvalho. And yeah, actually, they were all sweeps, all 2-0 down there. So that was our only other feature match going, and it just ended about the same time that the one we saw ended as well. So that will do it down there. Rich Hoen, Jack Dobbin, and Ben Stark winning their matches to get things kicked off at this Pro Tour here. And so far, so good for our drafts. You know, I mentioned it at the beginning that the testing teams particularly have had a difficult time breaking this format down and really coming to a consensus and getting it down to what it is. And this is our first step towards seeing kind of where each of the teams actually came out. So we've got 2 more rounds of booster draft coming up for you before we get to standard. But for now, let's head back to the news desk in Rich Hagan.
Well, that escalated quickly, although escalate, that's not in Aether Revolt, but nonetheless, a quick round one. There's still plenty of time left on the round. The good news is we have a roving camera, we have a roving Brian David Marshall out there behind me on the floor looking for great magic to bring you as we head down the stretch of round number one. So a few results to bring you before we get down there. Masashi's Shota Yasuoka, he's 1-0. He was up against Mutiny's Sam Black. So a big crunch match there, and Yasuoka won that one. Another Japanese Hall of Famer with the win is Masashi Oiso. Over face-to-face is Steve Rubin, another big clash. And Larson was always destined to win the match between Larson and Joe Larson, who won for Channel Fibre Live. So Joe Larson underway with a win. Down on the floor, Brian David Marshall. Plenty of Hall of Famers, plenty of Pro Tour champions, plenty of world champions to choose from. Who have you got, BDM?
Thanks, guys. Here on the floor, lots of Magic playing out here still. One of the big matches still underway is World Champion Brian Brown-Duin versus Hall of Famer, two-time Pro Tour champion Gabriel Nassif. They're in the middle of Game 2 over here, and you can see there's a lot of crazy stuff going on. We talked a little bit about Winding Constrictor earlier, and Winding Constrictor Walking Ballista is in play for Gabriel Nassif. Consulate Shield Guard and Flyer for Brian Brown-Duin. I can tell you he's got a Dawn Feather with a siege modification on it. And, there was a little bit of time there where Gabriel Nassif was scrapping for mana, but now he has his Walking Ballista Winding Constrictor engine online. Curious to see where this goes. Luis, I'm curious what you think about the board position here.
Luis, BDM's just asking about the board position. What's your take on it?
Nassif certainly has the long game kind of under control with a Winding Constrictor along with a Walking Ballista, but whether that Dawn Feather Eagle can finish him off before he can get enough control going is really what it's going to come down to. Since Walking Ballista you can pay 4 and then put an additional ++1 counter on it. So he could take out the Dawn Feather Eagle, but that would cost him the Walking Ballista here.
So Gabriel Nassif in control of the long game.
Ballista. Guys, I can tell you I have a little problem with my earpiece. I'm not able to hear you down on the floor right now, so.
So we're up here back in the news desk. So Luis and I will take over. We're watching on monitor up on high. Gab Nassif on the left.
Walking Ballista is done. And it's all right, so the board is we have 3 servos here for Gabriel Nassif. Got the Winding Constrictor and a Sly Requisitioner, which has been doing some good work for him. The Walking Ballista is gone, but it took down the Flyer, so that was kind of a big deal there. And Brian Brown-Duin trying to turtle up behind his Consulate Shield Guard. Here we go. Now we see one of the mythic uncommons of the set, an Untethered Express, comes down for Gabriel Nassif, and if Brian Brown-Duin can't find an answer for that, that's going to make quick work here in Game 2. There we see one of the mythic uncommons from Kaladesh comes down. It's an Aerial Responder for Brian Brown-Duin. 2/3 Vigilance and Lifelink, flying. Now the turn goes back to Gabriel Nassif. What can he do to punch through? I can tell you he is holding a Cruel Finality, which if Brian Brown-Duin were to put everything in the way of that Untethered Express, Gabriel Nassif could mess up that math quite easily with that card. So here you see Nassif cruise the Untethered Express and sends it into the red zone alongside a servo. Brian has 3 open mana to work with. He's looking at the board. He's thinking about his blocks. Puts the Consulate Shield Guard in front of the servo token. And Nassif does a little bit of math. You can see him finger counting. He's got a number of tricks in his hand here. And he is content to get in and let his token die. 6 cards in hand for Gabriel Nassif, and he's trying to figure out his option here. Brian Brown doing not nearly as many options in hand. Revolt is turned on, and the Night Market Aeronaut comes into play with a +1/+1 counter for Gabriel Nassif. Just 2 cards in hand for Brian Brown and I could tell you one of them's a land. I couldn't see the other one. They're actually both lands. He has nothing in hand here to work with, but keeping those cards there, representing something. He's got a lot of untapped mana. Could mean any number of things, and Gabriel Nassif has to account for that. Nassif's lining up his attack here, thinking about what he wants to do. Always a very deliberate player, Gabriel Nassif. Often the last player playing at the end of any given round. Crews up the Untethered Express, now a 5/5. Becomes a 6/6 when it attacks. Sends in the Aeronaut as well. Attacking into a board of Servo Token, Consulate Shield Guard, and Aerial Responder. Servo jumps in the way. Cruel Finality tramples over. Allows Gabriel Nassif to trample over for the final points of damage. And the match goes to Gabriel Nassif, the Hall of Famer. And I can tell you, we do have another Hall of Famer playing. We're going to make our way over there. There we go. So, there we go. I have it. I can see a match between Hall of Famer Raphael Levy and new member to the East-West Bowl playtesting team, John Stern, a member of Team Mastrop East. Raph Levy, of course, a member of Top Level. 2 of the new teams here as part of the team series. And taking a look at the board. Try to get you a game update here as soon as we can.
They're here for a bit, I don't know which.
See John Stern sacrificing Implement to Ferocity, putting an extra counter on his Janjeet Sentry. So Rich, what are you making of this board here?
Well, the number of times I've seen people in the chat when we're streaming talk about Lifecrafter's Bestiary and saying, take the Bestiary, it doesn't matter whether you're green, it's just an amazing card. Anytime you see Lifecrafter's Bestiary on the table, that's pretty scary. Luis, how good is Scry?
It's very good with that card in particular because it finds you the creatures you need to keep triggering it. So it's not a card I'd put in my deck if I weren't able to access green mana, but in a deck with green, it's just a fantastic card.
So is this still game 2 BDM? It looks like it might be.
I'm checking right now on the game score. Raph Levy won game 1. This is game 2.
And there it is by the looks of things.
Oh, and Raph Levy takes the match here. And over John Stern, so in the top level versus Mastrop East team series, Raph Levy gets an extra point, sending it back up to the desk for you guys, Rich and Luis.
All right, thanks very much to Brian David Marshall out there on the floor for us. We're checking alongside Luis Scott Vargas, Hall of Fame, of course. Some results coming in, so many great players. Paul Chion actually begins with a loss against Arnaud Baglin of France, but John Finkel is underway with a win over Mateus Martins of Brazil. Australia's David Mines, part of Team Tapas, all the Australians together pretty much. He's 1-0. Working our way through, let's see who else we've got. Martin User, who you saw watching the Raf Levy match. Martin User he's on Channel Fireball Fire, right? So he's underway with a win. And so is Lance Austin. Now, Lance Austin, I met this guy, didn't know him at all, coming from Prague. He played at the GP, Luis, and he was talking about an interesting experiment. He was off to test for his first Pro Tour, mind you, with Travis Wu, who was sort of having a kind of open, constructed testing camp where no respect for reputations, didn't matter, how many matches you won, how many GPs you won. You could just come along and get a real kind of open forum to try and work out what was going on in standard. So cool to see Lance with a win straight away.
Yeah, that's a pretty innovative way to approach, especially for a lot of people, their first Pro Tour, I imagine, who are involved, and Travis, of course, having played many Pro Tours at this point.
Right. As a hunch, we're going to talk at lunchtime about some of the cards from Aether Revolt that we expect to see in Standard. But as a hunch, are we going to see a really, no pun intended, a revolution in Standard? Or do you think we've seen most of the best decks in the first couple of weeks of the format?
I think it's going to be a mix. Pro Tours always bring out people who have new decks and new takes on existing decks. So whether you call a deck a completely new deck when it has 10 or 15 new cards, that's kind of up to you. But I would imagine we're going to see a mix of established archetypes and some new ones.
Okay. Matt Nass is a winner, 2002 World Champion for Dex Army. Carlos Ramau is a winner over Bernie Wen of the United States. But what we're going to do is mark your card for all the archetypes that you're going to be drafting when you're at your Friday Night Magic, or your local store, or just drafting on Magic Online, because 10 color pairs to choose from. What are they all trying to do? Because it turns out in every set there are some clues to subtly send you, and sometimes not so subtly, in the right direction. So it's time to work our way through the Aether Revolt draft archetypes.